Hi there, I'm Sienna, and my CEO mom made me her servant when I turned 4, and then I took over her company at 15. But before anything else, please remember to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and hit that notification bell icon. You may know her as Silicon Valley executive or an even bigger entrepreneur, but Diana Elmore is just a regular mom who found success. She was the founder of her own biotech company, and because of her stunning meteoric rise to success, world-renowned biographers have written several books about her. But there's another thing she's doing these days, and it could surprise you. She's making her only daughter do all the work for free. What? Oh, you didn't know that Diana had a daughter? That daughter is me. She made me her servant, practically. When I was 4, she made me do all the housework. You heard that right. 4. I was already quite a bright child, I was told, and I could do simple tasks successfully like washing dishes, placing calls, and cleaning her lab equipment. She never let me go to school, and so all I ever did was what she needed me to do. I was not even aware that an outside world and things like schools existed. My developmental years revolved around that small 6x6 meter garage, and all I knew were the words I heard my mother muttering to herself. At age 8, she was finally able to afford to rent her own space, and she opened up her own laboratory. For the first time, I was allowed to see the outside world. I had to grow up pretty quickly. Living and working amongst adults in her fledgling company showed me and taught me a lot. But looking back, I realized that I may have been robbed of a childhood. I never got to play or make friends. Instead, I spent my days mopping floors, scheduling meetings, and taking out the trash. My mother knew how to make me do her bidding. With a look and a seemingly harmless sentence, she could make me tremble. She may simply say, "I'm your mommy," but what I would hear is, "I'm your leader. You're to help and protect me. You have to listen to me, and you have to do what I say." I was born on a Friday the 13th, and that may have played a big part of why she treated me so horribly. See, Mother was a woman of science, but perhaps unexpectedly, she was also a woman of superstition, and because I was born on what she would consider an unfortunate day, she thought, nay, believed, that I was to be her downfall. And that was how it all started. She kept me hidden. She kept me under her, always under her heel, so that she may be able to crush me any time should the need arise. And that was exactly how I felt. I felt as if I was always living under the threat of her displeasure. But despite the many trials I underwent living under my mother's authoritarian rule, I did not grow up weak and cowardly. I instead became strong and independent, and I worked day and night for her, waiting only for the chance to strike the way I would watch her strike at any business opportunity. She may have been the worst mother, but from being her servant, I learned. I learned how to be calculating and shrewd. I learned how to make difficult decisions, and I learned how to run a company. I knew one day I could be free of her, and it only meant I had to do one thing. I had to topple her. Years passed and I turned 15. My mother's company grew bigger and her offices moved to Silicon Valley. At that point, I was basically doing the things she refused to do herself. All she really did anymore was go into the offices and frown at everyone. One day, as she walked into the laboratories, furious and vicious for some unknown reason, she took out her frustrations on Ginger. Now, Ginger was not the sharpest receptionist in the world, but she was probably the sweetest, and everybody loved her. Unfortunately, my mother harbored no fondness for anyone other than herself. "Ginger!" she yelled that fateful morning. "Where is that bimbo of a girl?" Just then, Ginger appeared from behind the reception, a mug of coffee in her hands. I'm sorry, Doctor," she stammered. I was just getting your coffee." "What time is it, Ginger?" said Mom. Ginger, a bit confused by the question, seemed to compute why Mother was asking her the time. It was as if she was asking herself why such an intelligent woman with her own watch could not tell what the time was for herself. And then she began to stare at the massive analog clock that hung from the wall behind her. She then cocked her head in an effort to read the time, I could only imagine. 8:30? She tried. My mom hit Ginger's head with her purse. 8:31, you imbecile! 8:31! I did not pay $20,000 for that massive clock to hang above your head so that you could be ready 1 minute later. Mom, I said in an attempt to calm her down and to get a hold of her hysterics. But then she shot me a look that told me she was not happy about what I just did. Doctor, I'm sorry, Doctor. I corrected myself, but I'm sure Ginger tried her best. You don't need to scream at her like that. You shut your mouth, you good-for-nothing leech! My mother snapped at me. I'm sorry, Doctor, muttered Ginger. I could see the tears beginning to well up in her eyes. It's all my fault. Please don't be mad at Miss Sienna. But my mother was not done. You have one job, Ginger. One job. Reception. You can't even do that properly. Should I have my daughter do your job for you too? Take my friggin' coat already. Jesus H. Christ! She then slammed her heavy fur coat over Ginger's head, and then she threw her purse at her. The force of it all made Ginger collapse over her desk, and when she appeared from behind the fur coat, she revealed her blood-soaked face. Her face had slammed so hard onto the desk that she'd broken her nose. Gasps were heard around the room, and when Ginger figured out what we were staring at, she held her fingers up to her face, and when she saw her own blood cover her fingers, she began to scream hysterically. She ran around the room and then disappeared behind the reception area, and when we heard a thud and a clatter, we knew she had passed out. Now, if this had just happened 10 years ago, it would have been commonplace and inconsequential. Just another big wig being a diva. Luckily, the internet is a thing now. Everyone sees everything, and reputation is king. One video could spell disaster for anyone, much more for a public figure as large as my mother. Remember how I said I learned how to identify opportunity just like my mother did? Well, that was the day I decided the opportunity had come. Everybody films everything, and so all I had to do was scare some people who were in that room that morning into handing me their phones, and I had proof of how much a tyrant my mother was. I sent that video to a few trusted journalists with instruction that they can only release it the moment I say so. I approached the board of directors. I showed them the video and informed them that this video has leaked, and that they should look into replacing my mother before the story broke. That way, we would be ahead of the consequences. But they didn't listen to me. Like my mother, they only saw me as unworthy. They were greedy themselves. Knowing that the position of CEO would be vacant, they began to fight between themselves. I was so incensed that I leaked the story anyway. It didn't take long before the story got traction and became viral. Within a day, my mother became known as the terror of Silicon Valley. Hashtags began to trend. Cancel Diana, Justice for Ginger, and Tyrants Must Fall. Perhaps funnier still was that the things I warned the board of directors about came to pass. 24 hours after the news broke, the company's stock began to tank. I told them to fire my mother, issue a public apology, and name me as successor. They followed my advice, except for the last part. They still wanted the position for themselves, and as they squabbled over for who deserved it more, I saw another opportunity. If they weren't going to hand it to me, I was going to take it for myself. Over the years of working for my mother, I had amassed a few contracts in the industry and in the media, and finally, I made use of them. I gave a tell-all interview. I broke my silence. I finally let the world know how my mother treated me from a very young age, and that got people talking about me and my story. I also arranged interviews with former colleagues and collaborators who had a chance to witness how my mother really was when cameras weren't rolling. They marveled at how awful my mother was behind closed doors, and the sentiment that I should inherit her company and her position began to circulate. I must admit, that was my doing. One tweet from a fake profile was enough, and people ate it up. Suddenly, the board of directors' desires for the position were dashed. Were they not to name me CEO, they faced the consequence of the further tanking of our stock prices. I had them cornered, but I didn't stop there. In addition to becoming CEO, you will name me chairman of the board, I demanded when they called me into an emergency meeting. That is preposterous! Exclaimed a portly, white-haired man. You can't just push me out of my position! I turned towards him with an eyebrow raised. can't I? And to the other members of the board, I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, in the past few days alone, our stock prices have plummeted 8%. Now my mother would not bend to public opinion, but that thinking is what got her to where she is now, not in this room. If you want to disregard what our shareholders think and what the public think, go ahead. But I assure you, by the time this scandal blows over, there will be nothing left of this company, and your shares will be nothing more than dust. Keep your positions, if you like, and shun me just like my mother did. But I would like to remind you that we are a publicly traded company, and as such, our public, our investors, dictate our stock prices." That scared them. They named me CEO and chairman, and the first thing I did was fire all the board members who looked down on me. In their place, I put people who I trusted, the people who were kind to me. Even Ginger got a promotion.